Hello and welcome to Political Capital. I'm Chris Bishop. Now this week we have a look into the high panel review onto the intelligence services of South Africa. It's a fairly damning report that says that the intelligence services have been used all too often in the past for political purposes. We'll be examining it, and we have in the studio this week a man who's also going to give evidence at the Zondo Commission, Mo Shaik, the former head of intelligence for South Africa, a former banker, a man who spent 9 months in solitary confinement and now joins me here in the studio. Mo, just to start off with the Zondo Commission, you've been subpoenaed. Yes, next couple of months. Just give us an idea, before we get into the high panel review, exactly what you're going to be having in your testimony.
Well, from my understanding of the Zondo Commission, it is looking at the mechanisms by which state capture happened. And state capture defined as essentially a group of people or networks of people who took undue advantage using access to political connection to get financial gain and other gain from state institutions or from government departments. The evidence that I would be asked to give is, as the head of the intelligence services at that time, the foreign intelligence services. What did I know about it? What did we do about it? And what did we recommend? Now, it is no secret that, yes, we did look into the matter, and yes, we did make specific recommendations, and those recommendations were to investigate this phenomenon before it became the phenomenon. And I think, on hindsight, if people listened, we wouldn't have been in the position that we are in today.
Obviously, your testimony is yet to come at the Zondo Commission, but just give us an idea of something in your time as a civil servant that, for want of a better word, horrified you about what was going on at the time.
Well, there were a few things that horrified me, but the first would be the beginnings of signs of people placing undue influence on the state because of their relationships with the president or with ministers. We have heard evidence before the commission already of certain individuals being called and told that they were going to be ministers before they were appointed as ministers. And in particular, the case of Minister Fikile Mbulula. And he made it quite clear that he was informed about being a minister from the Gupta family before he was actually informed by the president of that post. Well, those are the things we were looking into, and those are the things we made recommendations for, because that would have been undue influence on the president, and it would have been either using information that was provided to them for private gain, and it may even go to the extent of trying to influence the direction of the cabinet as well. Now, all of that is an attack on the constitutionality of the country, and we as the intelligence services at that time had a responsibility to deal with that issue.
So what about the agents who work for you and for the intelligence services? I mean, they were obviously all young, determined men who took a lot of risks for their country. Why do you think some of them were so easily corrupted?
Well, intelligence in many ways is the game of secrets and influence. And I think many agents, and I must say up front, they are incredibly good people and very capable people in the intelligence services. But every so now and then you get a few who want to play in what I call the upward game in management, and they would play above the head of the services, go to ministers, promise things, promise information, and they too try to use information for their own promotion, and that is the beginning of a very corrupt, slippery slope. You know, Chris, intelligence is a necessary evil, and therefore it requires strict discipline. It requires what I would call proper checks and balances. And when you have political interference in the intelligence services, you end up having the kind of chaos that has resulted and is still with us at the moment.
And there were warnings, though, just after your time. I think you left in 2011, I believe. But there were warnings that the intelligence service was going this way. What was the feeling inside the service itself?
Well, I put this squarely on those who were the political accountability for the intelligence services, and in particular the ministers. And you know, intelligence is such a thing that requires, and firstly, I don't believe that there should be a minister, but I may be wrong and I'm open to be convinced. And the moment you have a minister of intelligence, well, what does a minister do? Well, in this case, the minister interfered, started to micromanage, started to get involved in operations that they should not get involved in. And I think when the minister starts to act as the head of the intelligence services, he or she loses the obligations of political control, accountability, etc. And I think these are all the issues that were discussed in the panel report. I mean, essentially, does the minister have the responsibility to task an intelligence service? Again, that's been debated by the panel report, and I think the panel report is rather fantastic reading.
What made things even more complicated in your time, that the head of state then, Jacob Zuma, he was a former intelligence man.
Yes.
It was almost like a sort of Kremlin type thing where you had the state and the intelligence service playing by the same book in some ways. How much more complicated did that make it for you in that time?
It's not a unique phenomenon, the way I understand. We've seen this world over, where people who head the intelligence services invariably end up possibly as head of the government. Now, it does present some complications, because someone who comes from the profession of intelligence, who's now a president, will have their particular views about how intelligence should be run. So in a sense, there's an over-reliance on the president, who then determines for himself or herself the way the intelligence services should be run, rather than leaving that to intelligence professionals. So in this particular case, we had the example of the president desirous of amalgamating the intelligence services into what's called the State Security Agency, because that was his particular paradigm of thinking, that intelligence serves state security. Those of us who went through the negotiation process on intelligence made a remarkable shift away from state security to intelligence as a profession of informed research, as a profession that would accumulate knowledge in a particular matter and give wisdom on the matter, hopefully. And I think there was a clash of paradigms. And the president, because the president does have the constitutional responsibility for the direction of intelligence services, could impose his prerogatives on the intelligence services, and which we have seen has ended up not in a nice place.
And actually, one thing I have to ask you as well, I mean, I was reading it in a book earlier today, that it was alleged that when the NPA started to investigate President Jacob Zuma, you were annoyed at the time when you felt that it was just a political move to keep him out of the... Yeah. Did the scales fall from your eyes later, or what?
No, I think we should not forget that we do have a history in the country, immediately post the democratic dispensation, where institutions and bureaucratic institutions were far too political and political partisan. I still stand by the fact that the NPA at that time was far too political partisan in its prosecution of President Zuma. And I think we have seen the abuse of those state institutions, and even the courts today are debating the matter. But this has nothing to do with, and I think there's validity. There's validity in former President Zuma's argument that said he should have been tried with Shabir Shaik. The fact that he was not tried with Shabir Shaik was a political decision made by the NPA in a politically partisan manner.
And two of the people named in this report, Siyabonga Twele and David Matlobo, and I quote in the phrase here, it's one I've never heard before, but they were accused of executive overspill in the last decade or so. Yeah. Do you think they should be held accountable?
Absolutely. I think we need to provide a platform for them to explain their case on the matter. And let me tell you that it's not going to be an easy discussion, because the laws were changed in a way that allowed a minister to execute overspill. And this was a serious tension between Minister Siyabonga Kwele and ourselves, where we came in from the old dispensation, the democratic dispensation, where we believed that there was a line that separated ministerial responsibility from operational responsibility. The laws that were changed subsequent to it being passed in 1995 does in fact give the minister some responsibility in respect of appointments, in respect of considering operations. I don't agree with it, but that's the law.
And what about the man himself, Jacob Zuma? I mean, he has dismissed this report as not high level. He says it was written by apartheid spies. What's your take? Do you think he should be feeling bad about it?
I think he should be feeling bad about it. That was a rather inappropriate comment, and a comment that he should know can lead to serious trouble. It got me in serious trouble before when I made such a claim. He should have learned that lesson. But I think he had ample opportunity to, before the report came out and when these people were appointed, because the appointment was not secret, the appointment was public. He chose not to speak when the appointments happened. He chose not to speak when they were doing their work. He chose only to speak once the report was not, as I would put, in his favor, or in the minister's favor that he appointed. And I think that's rather an unfortunate claim, and it doesn't help the intelligence services. If anything, it creates more tension within the intelligence services.
Okay, Mo Shaik, hold that thought there. We're going to a quick break here. Now, when we come back to political capital, should intelligence operatives be lining up at the Zondo Commission? And also, we'll talk about comrade deployment in business. Do stay with us. Welcome back to Political Capital. I'm Chris Bishop. Now, still in the studio, I have with me the former head of South African intelligence, Mo Shaik. We've been talking about the high-level panel review, and also we've been talking about the Zondo Commission, where you're going to give evidence. You just mentioned before the break, you said Siyabonga Twele and David Matlobo, former state security ministers. You said they should be held accountable. I just want to ask you quickly, what should happen? Should they be charged or what?
Well, I think they should be, in light now of the report made public, I think they should be able to prepare a response, and particular response to either the president or the follow-up work of the commission itself, because I think there's going to be more work that's going to be done, and I think they should be given the opportunity to explain themselves. The Inspector General is getting involved in matters, the Parliamentary Committee is getting involved in matters, and clearly these will be issues that the next administration, I don't know whether it's the 5th or the 6th administration will have to grapple with in figuring out how the intelligence services go forward. I do want to say, though, that for me the question would be whether they apply their minds rationally to their task. And I think many of the ministers throughout cabinet, increasingly the test of rationality in the execution of ministerial powers has been questioned. And it's been questioned by non-governmental organizations, it's been questioned in the media, and the courts are pronouncing on it. And I think if ever there is something that needs to be understood, and it's a maturation of our democracy, that no longer can power by any minister or cabinet minister, even any director general, be executed without rational thought to applying their minds to what they are executing.
Because that's a thought, isn't it? I mean, one of the cases you could bring here against the ruling party, that they've been obsessed in the last 10 years or so with intelligence and prosecutions.
Correct. And I think it is a paradigm of the old. and it's understandably so. The ANC was groomed in the Cold War days and would be very much influenced by the Cold War days and the conspiracies that go with that. But I think the world has moved on, and I think our challenges are quite remarkably different now. And the question we need to be asking ourselves, do we have an intelligence service fit for purpose given the challenges that the new government or the new administration will face? I can speak endlessly about that, but we can't keep reading that the fourth industrial revolution is knocking on the door of the world and not being able to explain what does this mean for all of us and what does it mean also for the intelligence services. I think we need new kinds of individuals. We need data analysts, we need computer programmers, we need, and even if you look at other areas like food security issues, the things that could be done by the intelligence services in just helping or be part of a thinking process requires the combination of knowledge, technology, and the capability of moving that to execution. But like I'm saying, I'm no longer there, and it's bad to rule from the grave. But I do want to come back to President Zuma's comment about apartheid spies. I have worked with almost all of the people on that committee, and I worked with many of them during the underground days. And I can tell you that if any of them was an apartheid spy, then I would not be sitting in front of you today, Chris. I mean, so do I believe the veracity of the claim? No, I don't. But President Zuma was the head of intelligence services, and he may know something that none of us know. But then the onus is on him to say what he knows, and to say it at the appropriate forum.
Do you think we should have a line of former intelligence operatives, maybe even including the president himself, lining up at the State Capture Commission to give evidence?
Well, I hope that many of the people implicated in the State Capture Commission will go there. And I held this view, and I know it may not be a very popular view, but beyond state capture, we need to go back and build the country, build the institutions again. And it seemed to me that this may be the beginnings of a possible second chance at our truth and reconciliation. But it has to be based on people going forward, using this as a very reflective experience, accepting that mistakes were done, accepting that things, we became narcissists in our power, and go before South Africa and say, yes, I've made mistakes, and we can draw the line so that we can go forward. And I think that, for me, is the more higher purpose of the Zondo Commission.
How likely is it in the future? I mean, you're a person with deep roots in the ruling party and the struggle, that there'll be a South Africa in maybe 10 years' time where political connections won't matter in business?
I think we're fast coming to that. There's reasons why we have the kind of system that is developed. But I think over the 25 odd years of our democracy now, there's a maturation taking place. We are going to see, and we've seen it in the appointment of the new head of the NPA, that the process followed was remarkable. It was held in public, everyone could see what was going on, South Africa could get a sense of issues, and I think at the end of the day, the best person got the job. So the promotion of what I would call competency and competitiveness in a transparent manner really does work. And I think the more this becomes part of our culture, the more you'll see that it's not someone gets a job because the political party wills it, but someone gets a job because they are really good for it. And for me, the issue is, how do we execute our functions in a non-partisan manner?
How far away do you think we're talking here? And particularly, I can hear people at the state-owned enterprises in those countries saying, well, what a great idea. But how long do you think it's going to take?
I think we're going to see lots of this in the new administration. I think, and there's a reason for it. Because the country is not only in need of a second TRC, but I think the country is in need of a new compact between everyone. between capital, business, universities, unions, government. A new compact is needed to take us out of the kind of declining economy that we're in. And a new compact has to be based on expectations, has to be based on values, has to be based on a vision. And I think in designing that vision, these issues will feature, that we need to move beyond party or political partisan approaches to many of these institutions. And I think it's correct, because if we are to enhance our competitiveness as a country, as a nation, we need to have a unifying vision.
How difficult is it going to be for the ruling party in this country to sort of wean itself off this kind of system, or you said even patronage of putting people in jobs, because a lot of people are getting a lot of advantage, a lot of money out of it?
Sure, it's an economic question. I think the economics of patronage has come to the very end. There is no more money to take. Now, if you take any more money, someone has to borrow that money for you to take it. So I think in order to grow our wealth again in the country, like we did a decade back, an absolutely new approach to competitiveness will have to happen. And we need to build the cake before we keep only. So I think the paradigm of redistribution is coming to an end. And I don't mean redistribution to the poor, because that must still happen. But I'm talking about people seeing the state as a means from which they could interact to become billionaires or millionaires. I think that paradigm is reaching its end. It's an unsustainable operating model. It's exhausted. And I think what has to happen now, and what will happen now, because that's the real challenge, is how do we start to grow the cake all over again?
But yourself, you're completely out of public life now. You're
yes,
an entrepreneur.
Happily so out of public life. I'm open to whether, we've all heard the Tumamina call.
But would you ever go back? I mean, you grew up in the struggle and in prison. Would you ever go back to serve your country?
If I'm asked, yes. And if I really believe I'm going to be adding value. What I will no longer do, I will no longer be a conspicuous, subservient bureaucrat. If any minister or any president is going to demand conspicuous subservience from me, well, don't appoint me then.
Well, President Ramaphosa says anyone can Tuma themselves, so you can actually put yourself forward if you so wish. But do you think enough, and the world of intelligence, you think it holds no more allure for you?
Now, the world of intelligence is fascinating. And I think there are a lot of thinking that's going on, a lot of research, a lot of new knowledge is born in it, and that really does excite me. The problem is how to shift an intelligence service from where it is to where it needs to be, and that's change management that requires enormous temerity and energy. One
thing I have to ask you, actually, because I know you're a spy in the field before you were the boss. A lot of people say that intelligence work actually is not as glamorous and exciting as people think it is. It can be very boring at times and very laborious. Is that true?
Absolutely true. Intelligence work is lots of reading, lots of thinking, lots of talking to people about shaping ideas or issues. It is not as glamorous as 007, okay, but I got the 007 face, but it's not as glamorous as 007 makes it out to be.
So you've spent like weeks sitting outside people's houses, watching them, that sort of thing?
Yeah, because, it's just take anything. If I wish to follow you, the amount of people it will require, the amount of resources it will require, and then you are sitting at your home for 6 hours and I got to sit outside your home for those 6 hours. It's sometimes incredibly boring stuff.
And one thing I'm going to say, I know you're still playing golf, and your brother's still playing golf as well. Last time I saw him, he was on the course.
Well, I'm not playing golf anymore. I just so bad at the game, it was just driving me insane. So I've taken a break from it. But I do hear Shabir still plays. Yeah.
Okay. And how is he? Is he keeping well?
Yes, very soon he would be over his 15-year sentence, and I think he'll be a free man, much to my relief.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mo Shaik.
Thank you.
Golfer, former head of intelligence, former solitary confinement prisoner, former banker, and now entrepreneur. I'm afraid that's all we got time for on this episode of Political Capital. From me, Chris Bishop, it's goodbye.